Meeting of Committee of the Department of Public Works. My name is Councilor Michael Green. I'm joined by Councilor Tim Rudd and Councilor Joe Driscoll. The purpose of this meeting is I had discussions previously with the Civic Engagement Task Force of ADAPT CNY, and one of the things they had brought up is a desire to reimagine the potential for redesigning our city flag. I am intrigued by this because design is inherently subjective, but I would argue our flag is objectively ugly, and I think that there's a lot of potential for us to kind of reimagine who we are as a community and portray that through our design process and the city flag, which could then lead to further civic engagement and civic pride that would come from having a new design that truly represents who we are as a city. So at this point, I'll turn it over, and you can take us through kind of your ideas for the process.
Sure. Should I?
Yeah, please pull the mic close.
I'll pull it in super close, and I'll try and talk into it. Okay. I'm Joel Winkleman of the Civic Engagement Task Force of ADAPT CNY, and about 9 months ago, we started conversations after seeing a TED Talk, honestly, about city flag design, and we were in the midst of another project then, and so kind of kept the city flag on the back burner until we wrapped that project in the spring, and that gave us some time to focus on this. So starting in the spring, we started exploring what other cities have done as far as redesigning city flags. It's something lots of cities are doing and have done in the last several years. And so I reached out to a few people, including Ted Kay of the North American Vexillological Association, which is a group of flag design enthusiasts, and reached out to two people in the city of Tulsa who recently finished officially adopting a new city flag to try and understand some best practices around these processes. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of what I've learned over the last couple of months of talking to folks who have recently engaged in this kind of process, and just kind of give you a high-level overview of what a process could look like based on sort of best practices as far as there is such a thing. So you see here, this is our city flag. You probably already know what it looks like, so I won't go into detail about anything about it, other than to say that it does not meet any of the 5 principles of good flag design. So these are 5 principles distilled by the North American Vexillological Association. Flags should be simple. They should have meaningful symbolism. They should use just 2 to 3 basic colors. They should have no lettering and no seals. And they should be either distinctive or related to another unit of government's flag. Okay, I'd be happy, if you're really geeked out about this stuff, to send you the pamphlet that Ted has put together called Good Flag, Bad Flag. It's very nice. The thing about flag redesign initiatives is that committees design really good processes, but they don't tend to design good flags. So one of the things that comes out of these conversations is to really separate the development of the process from the development of the design, and really leave the design to designers and leave the process to civic groups and committees. So the first sort of best practice is, do not design a flag by committee, design a process by committee. What that means really then is empowering individual designers and using a selected jury to give your flag design public legitimacy. So rather than having a committee design it, have a jury make a selection of the best flag design, and really empower individuals to use their creativity and empower that jury to make a selection.
Could I push back there? So some of the other cities that have successfully designed it, that you named, that have done it. So if we empower designers, does that involve in the other municipalities, have they paid the designers, or is it more like a contest? And then I don't know if you're getting to that later in your presentation, but I just thought I'd ask.
Sure.
I'm just kind of curious as to what does that look like when we empower the individuals? Will we get good results if we don't pay people, but will is that something we could justify spending funding on?
Sure. So I can talk a little bit about a variety of ways when you get to the actual submissions phase of this process, how other cities have done it. Some cities choose to pay, most cities don't, and most really see it as a kind of as a matter of civic pride. But I'll talk to, you're exactly right to identify this problem of how do you elicit then a quality flag if you're not paying a professional, right? So I'll talk about
You'll get
that.
to that later? Okay.
Yeah, in just a second.
Great.
The other thing that I learned in talking with these folks is that people, as you know, people resist change even if it's a good change. And so one of the things that everyone emphasized is that as you're doing this process, public outreach and really, really having processes in place where people can give meaningful feedback and really feel seen, heard, and respected is an important part of any process, because people are going to need time and exposure to feel comfortable with change. So the 4 phases of the best practices of these processes tend to follow this format: a launch input phase, a design phase, and a selection phase. And I'll go through those in turn because this is the part that I think really matters. So the first phase is typically a launch phase, where it's just really about raising awareness in the community. And it's preceded by a lot of public outreach prior to a kind of splashy launch. That gives people time to know that this is coming so that it doesn't feel sprung on them. And it allows you to start bringing on board people who are civically engaged already, community leaders, and get them on board and get their feedback early and build them in as part of the launch process. So the launch phase is really is kind of a phase of preliminary public outreach prior to a big sort of public announcement. What Ted and the folks in Tulsa emphasized was that doing as much of this digitally as is feasible for your community really helps you keep track of engagement. If you do this with a website, if you have social media presence, this just offers you the ability to really gauge how much engagement you're getting, at least at one level. The deliverable of this phase is a digital presence for this initiative. So it would be a flag website like SyracuseFlag.com. It would be a set of other kinds of digital front pages or a digital presence for those for this initiative. Instagrams, Facebook, probably not Twitter for whatever reason. That's not a place that flag geeks congregate. That's what they told me. The next phase is the input phase. The input phase is where you try and elicit a sense of what the public thinks meaningful symbolism might be. What the folks from Tulsa suggested after a variety of test questions is that the questions that elicited the best feedback for them were what was variations of this. What are the places or events that have made Tulsa or Syracuse the city that it is today? This gets people telling stories. It gets people identifying places that can then be meaningfully symbolized on the flag. So this phase is now where you reach out to the public and you ask for as much input about what do we want to see on the flag, right? So again, social media and digital presence allows you to really keep track of how many people you're engaging, but it does not necessarily mean that you just throw something up on the internet. This just means that you elicit submissions for this feedback in a single location. So I could envision the input phase including a lot of tabling with laptops or tablets where people could then put their input, or little palm cards where people would have an email address that they could send their input to. The deliverable from this phase is a design prospectus that can help guide your designers. It tells the designers what it was that people said they wanted to see symbolized on the flag, right? So this input phase then gives you a short document that you can give to designers and give to the public prior to the submission phase to prepare them and to prepare you for judging the submissions. Once you've gathered the input, you enter the design phase, where this is where designers would come up with meaningful, symbolic representations of what was in the design prospectus and what the city said they wanted to see symbolized on the flag. As you mentioned, it's important to get good designers involved. You don't want to engage a process whereby you are thinking about committing to adopting a flag that was worse than what you started with. So you have this problem of needing to engage quality designers while also having enough scale and enough number and volume of submissions that you feel like this has really been a publicly inclusive process. Cities have handled this in a variety of ways. One way that both folks in Tulsa and at NAVA recommended is that you can have professional designers revise public submissions, so that you could have, for example, the public submitting designs, right? Maybe say you have something for school children, right? You give a design prospectus to a teacher. The class, a project for a day is designing these flags. They do it in marker and crayon. These get submitted, and a professional designer really takes the kernel of that design and makes it something that would look professional, puts it into vector graphics so that it's something that you could actually work with. It's one way that a lot of cities have sort of managed this, is having design consultants massage and revise, with the kernel of that idea. So then you're really getting something that's both public but also high quality. Engaging, as I've got here, right, that engaging schools is a great way to get that volume up, and it's a great way to get the whole public involved. Kids are doing it at school, they're talking about it at home. Everyone now feels sort of a part of the process. From this phase, what you hope to end up with is a large selection of candidates for the new flag. So what you hope to end up with through the design phase is a folder on a computer somewhere that has upwards of a couple hundred designs that you can then turn over to the jury to start culling down into finalists. So that's the deliverable of the design phase, is a passel of new possibilities. The selection phase is really two separate kinds of phases. The selection phase involves the selection of finalists, of the design competition. Here you really want to have the jury starting to select the finalists. This is where you really want to empower the jury to select the top 3, the top 5, the top 2. It really doesn't matter. It just depends on how the process shakes out in any individual city. But you have the jury decide what the finalists are going to be to put before the next body that engages the next phase of the selection phase, which is really identifying that single winner. Now here is where best practices sort of fall apart, and you have to be totally responsive to the way that the conditions of the city is. Cities have done this in a variety of different ways. They've had the jury select a single winner from the finalists. They've had the public select a winner. They've had the council select a winner from the finalists. They've had the council nominate a winner and put that before the public. It can go any sort of permutation of jury, council, whatever other decision-making body has to be involved, and public. This is really where, at this point, it's all dependent on the local process and the local conditions. But that selection of finalists really should be with the jury, because that's what helps give this process the public legitimacy, and what helps the council feel like this has been a process that's really come through the public and been authorized by the public, and the council is really at this point kind of channeling the public's will rather than imposing a flag on the public, and that helps reduce a little bit of that resistance to change. And so the deliverable from this phase is, of course, the winning flag. I have a couple other examples, but I'm happy to pause here. I could show you just the examples from the Tulsa process if you want to see what their before and after was, yeah, and how they've gone on to use this in wider civic engagement. So the top left flag there is the new Tulsa flag, and the bottom right is the old Tulsa flag. The old Tulsa flag was the city seal. The problem that they were trying to solve in Tulsa was that the city seal, much like most city seals, was only usable on official only the city could use the seal, which meant that no private citizen could fly the flag, no one could make their own flag, you couldn't really get this flag printed, you couldn't, because it contained the official city seal. And so a group of citizens, a group called TY Pros, and analogous to Adapt CNY in Tulsa, decided that they wanted to work on changing the city flag, and through the process that I just outlined, ended up having adopted the top left flag, which is more symbolic and symbolizes more things, and really symbolizes a wider set of experiences of Tulsa rather than just the government, right? So the lower right flag is a symbol of the government, whereas the upper left flag is really a symbol of the people. And I could tell you what has been symbolized here, but I want to show you a couple of things real quick that I think are just really interesting about how this process can then play out, or what the effects of this process of adopting a new city flag can look like.
You'll come back to tell us what the
yeah, if you want to know.
Yeah, I'd be curious. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that happened when Tulsa adopted this new flag was that they licensed the flag under the Creative Commons license, which gave entrepreneurs the opportunity to use that flag in all kinds of creative ways, which led to a lot of different activities. You can see on the big picture right is obviously just regular, ordinary merchandise, shirts, mugs, shot glasses, the kind of stuff that tourists would buy. But in the upper right, a local brewery, there was such attachment to this design of the flag that the local brewery made a beer called Tulsa Flag, and they put the image on the can, and it's sold like crazy. And so it's but it's totally authorized because it's a Creative Commons license, and so it allows these kind of local business folks to use that image in their marketing of whatever it is they're selling. Including not just for products and not just for merchandise, but a way to sort of unify the city. You can see at the bottom right, this is how that flag design, elements of it were incorporated in advertising the Tulsa Irish Fest, right? So it really became a symbol that was widely used throughout the city by a variety of different folks for a variety of purposes. So really, I think really emphasizes the way in which this flag became a symbol for the people and a symbol of the people. And since you want to know what it symbolizes, the larger blue field there symbolizes the Arkansas River, which runs through the city of Tulsa. The gold bar that runs through it's like the line that runs through the middle there is the they call this like the black gold, the oil field. In 1921 they struck oil, or 1920 they struck oil. So that's the sort of black gold or something, I don't know. The larger seal there is a representation, a more abstract representation of the image that's on the Oklahoma state flag, a Native American symbol. And then the larger white field on the bottom is a sort of a representation of the sort of warmth and openness of the community of Tulsa. In the middle is really interesting, and I think it's one of the most interesting parts of the Tulsa flag, and one of the most interesting ways that this flag can be used as a civic engagement process. That red field in the middle there of the larger symbol, that red circle symbolizes the 1921 race massacre in Tulsa, the Greenwood race massacre. I grew up in the city of Tulsa. I left the city of Tulsa in 2000. It wasn't until I left the city that I heard anything about the Greenwood race massacre. Even at that point, they were calling it a race riot. It was something that the city didn't talk about, didn't know how to talk about, and couldn't talk about. The fact that in 2019 it's now symbolized on the flag and is now represented on the flag represents a tremendous amount of progress in grappling with difficult parts of public memory. And I think it's a really an amazing achievement by the city to be able to process that public memory in a way that resulted in a symbol that the whole city now feels attached to. The white star in the field, I think, is the future. So that's what the flag symbolizes.
Yeah, what was the riot, the race,
it was the burning of a black middle class neighborhood.
Oh, that's the one okay.
Yeah,
that was
the Greenwood neighborhood.
Black Wall Street.
Black Wall
right?
Street. Yes, correct. So that's the idea of how a process might work. Again, like I said, this just is reporting back to you kind of what is for wider consumption are just sort of internal conversations that we've been having. There's lots of ways that this could look. This is by no means a plan that we're actively pursuing. It's simply just reporting out what we have learned, and it's something that we've got quite a bit of interest for internally of thinking about this. And I guess since maybe this is part of the maybe I should say that our next meeting is September 17th. At 5:30 p.m. for Adapt CNY if folks are interested in getting involved in preliminary parts of the conversation.
So in other communities that have gone through this process, can you talk a little bit more about the relationship between the civic groups and the city,
yes,
and who drove that process and how people were included and how that worked?
Yeah, so I'm happy to do that. So in the city of Tulsa, as I mentioned, which is just the most recent example, the TY Pros, the civic group, approached the council and asked for permission to initiate the process, laying out an outreach plan and laying out a set of milestones and a set of deliverables. And the council authorized TY Pros to initiate the plan. And so TY Pros was in regular contact with council, was giving regular reports, was regularly on the agenda for the city council. And that's how that process worked. So it was something that was driven by citizens, and the accountability was really at the council level.
Yeah, because I mean, I think one of the challenges we'll face is a bandwidth question of, the city itself probably doesn't have the resources to be able to drive this process. But at the same time, if we were to totally, allow a group to run with it on their own, there's a question of accountability and making sure that, the people we represent, which is everyone in the city, that they're engaged and doing that. So I guess the other question would be, what does a good engagement process look like? How do you specifically go out to people that might not know about Adapt CNY or, that might not even have the internet? And how do you go about doing that process?
Right. And I think that's where the conversations in Adapt internally are right now, is thinking about tapping into, we know certain kinds of groups that we could try and get in front of to start, talking about this process. And we're starting to talk about what other kinds of groups do we need to be linking with to make sure that this is a public conversation. Because I think, I've said this before to other folks, that I think that the flag is a really nice outcome, but it's really kind of a bonus outcome to a really broad conversation that happens across the city. And so that, from my perspective in the Civic Engagement Task Force, having the most inclusive and the broadest kind of reach is what I would really like to see happen through this process. So that's where we are, is starting to talk about beyond TNTs, beyond other kind of similar groups that are like Adapt CNY, who else do we need to get in front of to make sure, before we do this launch phase, right? Who would need to be included in the conversation? So,
and then from a jury perspective, what are the best practices in terms of deciding who would be a part of that?
So it's good to have people with some design knowledge. So it's good to have people who maybe are in some ways a design professional or a design adjacent professional. That can be a really nice person to have, or someone with the city of Tulsa had an art historian engaged in the process, but it's also really important to have leaders in local communities to be part of that jury process, so that part of being on the jury is also part of what Adapt's role would be, I think, or whoever is developing the design prospectus would be to help kind of educate that jury a little bit. So it's not just designers who sit on that board, or that jury rather. It's a wide range of people that is what really gives it the kind of public legitimacy. So I think community leaders, it's good to have a couple voices that know something about design, I think is good, but that's not a necessary criterion.
And so, your presentation focuses a lot on Tulsa, which is a great example. The TED Talk discusses other cities.
Yes.
Chicago specifically comes up a lot.
Yes.
And one of the things that I find interesting. So, here, I would tell you 99% of people don't know what our flag looks like, have never encountered it, don't experience it. And if you want to express civic pride, you're probably just wearing Syracuse University clothing. Like, realistically, that's how you do it here. And most people aren't associated with Syracuse University that are random citizens, right? So, you have some examples of how the design's incorporated into, products or anything else in Tulsa, but can you just expand upon that a little more in other communities and how having a design that represents the community can be incorporated into civic pride in general?
Sure. So I didn't show you. I didn't show you the images of people having it tattooed on their body, the Tulsa flag, though that definitely. I have several images of that. There was a whole variety of people who painted the flag themselves on either their property or if they were business owners on their property if they were business owners, or their property if they were just on their residence.
So what year was it implemented in Tulsa?
It was just adopted in 2018.
Oh, wow.
So
there's
very
already,
recent.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it's the most recent. It's the most recent new flag adoption. You find in the city of Chicago, for example, that the Chicago flag or some version of it is on everything. It's on Chicago rap albums. It's there. It's on. The flag is flying everywhere. That's one way that people can express their civic pride, is that you could actually, if it's an attractive design, you might actually want to fly the flag at your house, or you might want to fly the flag at your business. And yeah, I think that's the main way that you could think about it, being beyond just wearing the flag on some really attractive shirt.
And what does a good timeline look like? I mean, I know I'm not trying to pin you down on a specific date, but when other places have done it, how long does the process take to have it be, inclusive and to get all the steps in?
So the process in the city of Tulsa from launch or from pre-launch to adoption, right? From the moment that the council said, you have our blessing to start this process, to adoption, was about 24 months, is what it allowed them to really spend that time, the groundwork of reaching out to people, getting people to feel like they knew what was happening. The process itself from launch to selecting the winner was about 1 year, right? So the process of getting the flag officially adopted by the council, that was a longer process, and the pre-launch process were longer processes. So like I said, that selection phase, the final selection phase, and the pre-launch phase are kind of these like they're like not shadow phases, that's the wrong word, but are separate from even just that sort of year-long splashy campaign that's bringing a lot of public awareness. The sort of behind-the-scenes aspects is another probably about year of work.
Where places have had a public vote, what does that look like? I mean, is it an online vote? Is it managed by the organization? How does that manifest itself?
It has been done in as many ways as you can imagine. It's really been done. The public votes have been a large billboard advertising campaign with text the winner. There have been ways that actual winner selection has been pitched to the council, and the council has selected a winner. There has been public ballot adoption of X flag so that it is part of the regular electoral process. Really, you could do it any number of ways, and there's no right way to do it in general. There's a right way to do it for your particular situation.
Well, I just want to say that this is awesome. I really love it. I think it's really cool. I would be in full support. I guess my other question is, so when you get to the commercial licensing of it, so you get the Tulsa flag, an artist designs it, and then it's getting used on beers, T-shirts, everything indefinitely. I'd be curious to know how it worked in Tulsa. Was it basically, and again, as my other job is as an artist, so
oh, cool.
I'm just curious,
right?
How financially it works out, if the artist who made the Tulsa flag got a one-time payment, Or, I mean, I could imagine very few artists live comfortably, even ones who are successful, especially in today's climate and today's economy. So I could imagine being slightly salty, seeing it being used, sold at shops, sold all over the place, without compensation towards the artist who designed it. I'm in support of it, but I'm just wondering how that was navigated. I guess you kind of put up front that this is what's going to happen and this is the deal, and if you submit, then you're aware.
I think it has to be part of the process. It has to be built into the process so that your designers know what they're signing up for. And again, this is one that could be navigated in any number of ways that seem appropriate to the process.
In Tulsa, was there a fee though? Was there a one-time payment to the artist, or it was all?
No. It was simply sort of civic pride and civic glory.
Wow.
But also the artist.
Great design for civic pride.
Yeah, well, in this, I don't know if this artist is. I don't know if the artist is selling merchandise that's based on it, right? I mean, that is.
As the signature artist, I suppose they could capitalize on it themselves if it's for public use, and they could say, "I'm the one who designed it, and I'm selling T-shirts because I'm the one who designed it, and please buy them from me," kind of thing.
Right.
They could be the first to capitalize on it.
Right. And again, like I said, that part of the process really, again, is as variable as the other parts. So that high level input, at the high level launch, input, design, and selection those are the best practices. Within those, as you start to specify exactly what those look like, that's when you get a lot of local variation.
Great.
Other questions?
Tim, anything?
There's a lot of bad flags.
He said there's a lot of bad flags.
There are many bad flags, and we should feel pleased that Syracuse is not among the 100 worst flags.
Oh, that's good.
So we're not on the list. We don't meet any of those principles of good design, but we haven't been singled out for especially egregious design.
Is it more, I don't know, just looking at all these things on flags, it seems like most of them are in the south and like west, really, but the northeast is like the flag redesign thing as big. I don't know. Maybe I just need to spend more time reading, but.
Well, I don't know. I haven't looked at systematically, but a lot of the recent flag redesigns have been Western-ish. Portland had a redesign. Tulsa's west-ish. I mean, west of the Mississippi, anyway. I don't know where else in the Northeast these redesigns have been working. Milwaukee is in the middle of a long-running redesign process. Theirs has not been officially adopted, so, but they're another similar city that is undergoing this process right now.
Yeah, well, I would just say again, I really would think it's a great initiative, and I would be fully supportive of it if ADAPT wants to run with it. I echo Councilor Green's concerns about bandwidth and how much time the council would have to spend on it and the administration. I think it might be a challenge, but I think it's something auxiliary. Not speaking for all the councilors, but myself as a councilor would be hugely supportive of going down this road, because I think initiating a longer conversation about the history of Syracuse and what makes Syracuse great and what makes us distinct and what makes us original is a conversation this community could really use to sit in for a year or two to really think about what makes us great, what makes us original, what makes us special, because there is a long list that I don't think people talk about enough, and I think this would be a great project.
And it's not smokestacks anymore.
And it wouldn't be smokestacks. It's definitely not our pride and joy.
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, I think what would make sense is to check back in with the other counselors, with the administration, and then make sure everyone's kind of on board with the idea of it. And then from there, I think it's nailing down some of these details to figure out what we would want to do or what ADAPT CNY would want to do. And then from there, if it all makes sense, we would start a launch.
That sounds great. Our next steps, I think, internally are just trying to really nail down a fairly vague and high-level kind of outreach plan of what are the groups that we need to be finding ourselves in front of to just start the conversation. So that's, from our perspective, where we want to go next.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone? Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
No wavy lines.
Yeah, no way.